Good afternoon, YouTube world. Today is Saturday, 20th of January, 2018. As promised in my introduction video, I was going to do my next video, which is going to deal with the principles of community, the basics of civilization, and if time permits, principles of nationhood and nationality and how those are defined. I would like to say, during the course of these series of videos, I might tend to be redundant at times, whereby I'll try to emphasize or repeat certain points because, like I said, this is an unorthodox approach to things. I'm not approaching it from necessarily a strictly academic point of view, more of a common sense conversation that I want us to have. Let us reason together. I don't want to be preachy. I'm not like I'm preaching to you. I want us to engage each other. I want us to reason together. And I want us to try to work it out. This video series is more for sincere seekers, people that really want honest solutions, that really want to find a solution to the problems we have as Nigerians and as Africans in general. So without further ado, we're going to start from the beginning, and we're going to talk about a community. Let me talk about community. First of all, what is a community? Well, a community is basically a group of people who are in a common location that are working together for common ends because they have common needs and common goals to a certain extent. Now, in any interaction between any two people, like I explained earlier in the introduction video, we're going to use the process of analogy, whereby we're going to take a small situation, the microcosmic situation, and project that same idea onto a larger situation. And I feel like that is reasonable. That's basically the concept behind taking surveys. You survey 100 people, whatever percentage of answers you get, you can project that to be a representation of the larger whole. Now, in any transaction between two people, there are 4 possible outcomes. I win and you lose. That's one outcome. Second outcome, I lose, you win. Third outcome, we both lose. Fourth outcome, we both win from the transaction. Let me try to illustrate that with an example. Okay. If I choose to engage in a fight with somebody, depending on what kind of opponent I have, it could be a lose-lose situation, whereby we both get injured in that situation, both get badly hurt, break a leg, or whatever the case may be, have some kind of permanent damage that could occur on both sides. So whoever technically won the battle might not have won the war. In that situation, both can lose. In a situation where I take advantage of my neighbor or someone or whoever I'm transacting with, I could win and they can lose. If it's the other way around, they take advantage of me, they win, and I could lose out of that transaction. But there's also a possible win-win situation. For example, if I grow rice, you grow beans, and I want to eat rice and beans for dinner, you also want to eat rice and beans for dinner, I give you some of my rice, you give me some of your beans, and we both have rice and beans, and we both can eat rice and beans for dinner. This is a win-win situation. So, a community of people working together, there's always a possibility for a win-win situation. Now, maybe I should have taken these topics in reverse. I'm going to come back to community in a bit, but I also want to talk about the principles of civilization as far as how can people progress from barbarism and from being completely subject to the forces of nature. How do we have some kind of control over our destiny? How can we somehow, regulate the negative effects of our environment? Now, common sense will tell us certain things. And that common sense is the first principle of civilization is being able to eat. The abundance of food. If everybody within a community is well fed, then their main concentration or their main dedication does not have to be constantly searching for food 24 hours in a day. You don't have to constantly search for food 24 hours a day. So, when you become agriculturalized, when you develop agriculture within society, you take care of the primary problem of every human being or every living thing or every mammal, and that is you enable them to feed. You have control over the food supply. We can take examples of history. Even in our own so-called nation, Nigeria, even if we go back just as far as the Biafra War, we can find out that the Biafrans lost that war, being starved out, being restricted to food supply. If someone controls your food supply, they control you. If you depend on importation, you depend on other people to supply your food, they have leverage over you. They have some kind of control over you. It's also an access you don't even know necessarily what is going into food now. Like today, we have a lot of controversy about GMO, genetically modified foods, GM foods, and what that could possibly do as far as being consumed on a consistent basis. Take control of your own food supply. Within your community, you are empowered. So therefore, it is imperative and of primary importance that any nation develop their agriculture where possible. Nations that are not blessed or do not have the conditions that is viable for agriculture is a different thing. Well, then they have to become more creative and rely on others for their food supply. In any country or any nation that has the potential, has the conditions, and has all the resources available to develop their agriculture and does not do it, is putting their destiny into someone else's hands. So that goes without a saying. Agriculture must be developed. Okay? Now, a lot of us complain about a lot of things, as far as no electricity, no running water, the government this, the government that. Like I said before, there have been great nations. Electricity and running water is not imperative for economic development. There have been great civilizations and passes. Electricity just started in the 20th century. We're talking about 1900s. Nikola Tesla, invented the alternating AC/DC at the early part of the 20th century, 19 something. It's just in the past 100 years that we've had electricity. There have been great empires that conquered the world. Greek empires, Rome, there was no electricity, but they did have infrastructure. Infrastructure is necessary. Infrastructure, at least as far as roads and the means of moving goods from one part of the empire to another, so that commerce takes place. Commerce is movement. That's why a lot of these financial instruments that we call money is currency, because it flows. That's why hoarding money and burying it in the ground, it makes no sense. It's only it becomes dead, becomes stagnant. When it's in motion, when there's movement, the economy is buoyant. So infrastructure, such as roads and these kind of things, is of primary importance. But before I go too far into that, we're going to start with the basic principles. Okay? We understand what a community is. We understand that basics of civilization, for any people to have even the ability to use their brain, they have not to be worried about how they can eat. If your belly is full, your mind can expand into more abstract ideas that are not constantly occupied by immediate needs. Okay, we've got that out of the way. Now, luckily today, we had a lot. What is a nation? Now, the etymology of the word nation. The etymology of the English word nation, claimed in online etymology dictionary, is as follows. 1300, from Old French, nation, birth, rank, descendants, relatives, country, homeland, and directly from the Latin nationem, nominative natio, birth, origin, breed, stock, kind, species, race of people, tribe, literally that which has been born, from natus, past participle of nasi, be born. Okay. Political sense has gradually predominated, but earliest English examples incline toward the racial meaning, large group of people with common ancestry. Older sense preserved in application in North American Indian peoples. Okay, there we go. Now, the etymology, the origin of the word nation, is directly related to your ancestry. Like even it says there, tribe. Not necessarily political jurisdiction. A nation of people are people with essentially are people with a common ancestry. Although we also see here hold on one second. I want to say I don't believe I read here or somewhere that also people that could share a common language as well. Now, one thing we have to remember as African people, the Europeans purport, or they come with the narrative that they came over to Africa to civilize us. This is not the case. We cannot be naive as far as the motives of the Europeans when they came to Africa and what they did and how they separated Africa in 1885 under the Berlin Conference of 1885, where they divided Africa into political jurisdictions, and whoever the British, they got Nigeria. We cannot be naive. The true historically, it was Africans that civilized the Europeans. The Moors invaded what is now known as Spain in 711 AD, and they were there till 1492 AD. And that was the period that started what we call the European Renaissance. Before then, Europeans did not necessarily have the best of hygiene. They didn't shower. They were not as cultured as what they claim to be now. This is historical fact. Anyone can research it. It has been shown historically that Europeans do not necessarily have our own best interests at heart or other people's best interests at heart. And that's understandable. That's natural. They have their own interests. Every nation of people protects their own national interests first. We cannot be naive to believe that the Europeans did not have an understanding of how difficult it would be for people who have different language, different nation or tribe, different religion, to work together and function in a cohesive fashion. They were very aware of that fact. But historically, it has been shown that the Europeans have always used a tactic which is divide and conquer. Anywhere where there's chaos, it leaves the inhabitants, the locals, vulnerable to external penetration. Because where there's confusion, there's no coherence. Even the religious scriptures, if we go to religion, the Bible will say what? A house divided cannot stand. So we should never be naive to believe that the Europeans came with the best intentions. So anything that they brought with them, we have to be skeptical about it. We have to be skeptical about everything. Like I said, we have to take everything from the beginning. We have to question everything. What makes African peoples a tribe and Europeans a nation? What makes England a nation and Hausa people a tribe? What makes Scottish a nation and Fulani people a tribe? What did the Europeans say? What did the British say? The Great Britain? Do what we say and not as we do. Within the structure of United Kingdom, those who colonize today, they have 3 different nations. Each of them have their own parliament. Each of them have their own language, and they're self-determining to a certain extent before they come together under the United Kingdom or Great Britain, or by extension, the United Kingdom in more recent times. Each of them have their own flag, their own identity, and they coalesce together as the Union Jack, as the British. But that's not the system that the British people gave to us when we came here. Now, in any situation, like we said, community is defined by people that have a common interest, people that have common goals, things in common. When you have less things in common, then if you have more things that divide you than bring you together, there's always going to be hurdles. So, even as Nigerians, if we are to maintain that concept of Nigeria, then we have to find out what we have in common and unify that. The fact that English is our national language is an oxymoron. That it still puts us under colonialism. India, for example, they were also colonized by the British. They were colonized by the British, but in their schools, they still teach the local language compulsorily as well as English. Because it is natural for anybody to think in their own language first. In Nigeria today, a student has to do 2 works. First of all, you have to learn English. Then you have to learn how to think in English and how to logically deduce and deal with the information that you're given in English, which is a double work, which the Europeans don't have to do. The first principle of any individual, and by projection any nation, is being true to themselves. We have to be true to ourselves, first of all, before we can be true to anybody else. You have to be honest with yourself, first of all, before you can be honest with anyone else. We have to do a lot of introspection. We have to, what? Reinvigorate our own culture. Reinvigorate our own traditions. Whatever measures that we need to do to bring those about. This is going to be a process, and it starts right here in the mind. Stop running after these, or you both stop running after these Europeans to try to please them. You can never please them because they have a different agenda than you have. When you look at most of the presidents that get into office today, what's the first thing they do when they get it? Run to England, run to US, go and seek approval of the colonial masters, and you talk about we have independence. For you to have independence, you have to have independence of thought, first of all. Whatever a man thinketh, as a man thinketh, so is he. Whatever you think is what you manifest. You have to become self-determinant. Every political system that was organically created, the so-called democracy, is not the ultimate system. That is just a system that has evolved out of their own European history. And that system, in fact, is very recent. Even the US that preaches about democracy and how they try to take democracy all over the world. The word democracy does not even appear in their constitution. I've read the US Constitution and the Declaration of Independence several times. What is in there is a Republican form of government. But I'm not going to go today into the difference between a democracy and a Republican form of government. That's for another day. But what I'm saying is we have to be self-determinant. No nation has ever risen to power, to prominence, without patriotism, without the people within that nation having a love for that nation. And what is the love for that nation? The nation is not just the land, which is the country, to be specific. The nation is the culture, the individuality of those people, like I said, just like a family, like me. If I try to act like you, if I try to act like the next man, I'm not being true to myself, and I will fail. I can only be the best me I can be. If I try to be Michael Jackson, I can only be like Michael Jackson. I can't be Michael Jackson. But I can be the best me. I can be the best Shola Ladipo that there is, that there ever was, because that's me. I just have to be myself. We have to be ourselves. And we have to determine what is our community. What do we have in common? How can we create a win-win situation? Because without that, a society cannot function. A society cannot function if I'm constantly trying to get over on the next man. If I'm trying to constantly thinking as an individual and not thinking about the community. As an individual, we have a group of individuals. A group of individuals is not a community, and that is not civilization. If I do not recognize that we have a common interest, if I build a good road within this community, it's a win-win situation. It's beneficial to me that build the road, and it's beneficial to others. We have to be able to think in a win-win mentality, create situations that are mutually beneficial to each other. We have to have integrity, honor. This is even without the government. Government itself is an idea. Human being, nature is self-governing. There's never an absence of power. Before government, before all of these things, we had power structures. We had the native rulers. They had their own form of rulership, their own form of government, or so-called, which was equally effective with what it did within its realm of operation. We have to think, I'm not necessarily speaking about against government necessarily, but I'm asking us to question everything, because we cannot just take other people's ideas hook, line, and sinker. We can create our own ideas. Yes, all of these ideas have evolved, and a lot of people, even if you look at different nations, each one of them has their own individual expression of government, their own individual different forms of legislation and different forms that they do things. But the only way for us to find our destiny is to be true to ourselves. Another part of civilization is the law of contracts. The law of contracts is based on a certain amount of honor. For any society to function, there has to be honor in court. If I need to be able to plan anything, I have to be able to rely on the next man to perform the duty that he said he was going to do. And that's a big problem in Nigeria. Communication is a big issue. To get someone to answer a direct question is a big issue in Nigeria, because everyone is always thinking behind the question. Transparency, accountability, responsibility. Those are the watchwords for this session. Transparency, accountability, responsibility. And it doesn't start from the top. It doesn't start with the government. It starts with you and me and how we deal with each other. If I say I'm going to do something, I have to be accountable without excuses for what I say. And I have to be able to form according to what I do. That is the only way for you to have a long-term project, a long-term projection, for you to be able to plan something and for it to be effective within a community setting. There are certain things that benefit us as a community. If we are living in a society of individuals, then we're not civilized. We're still barbaric. And we have a long way to go. Because we're in this crabs in a bucket. We have this crabs in a bucket mentality. We have this dog eat dog mentality. And it's a shame. But I can understand it because the basic principles of civilization, the basic principles of nationhood have not been adhered to. Which is pride in who you are. If I don't have pride in anything, if I don't have honor, I'm going to sell anything. What profit a man if he gain the whole world but lose his own soul? I'll sell out to anything. You have to have some amount of honor, integrity, and pride in who you are. But pride in who you are is different from arrogance. It's different from looking down on the next man. It's not necessarily, they don't necessarily equate. So, we mentioned agriculture. That is something that must be instituted. By this time, it's a shame that we have very little. We rely on importation. Not enough mechanized farming or semi-mechanized farming. Yet we have fertile land throughout Nigeria. Food should not even be an issue. Let's not even get into the natural resources as yet. Let's not even get to that place. Agriculture, infrastructure. Those are the two basic things that we will implement. But before we get to that, we have to deal with what? Ourselves first of all. We have to define who we are. A nation people either have a common language or a common ancestry. Hausa people are a nation on their own already. Fulani is a nation already. Yoruba people are a nation. Igbo people are a nation. And each one of these people should be self-defining to a certain extent. And each one of them should be proud of their culture and proud of their heritage and teach that. The school system has to accommodate their local history, their local culture. When you teach the culture, you promote the culture, you promote cultural pride. When you have pride, then you have incentive to be honorable. When you don't have pride, then you denigrate to a dog eat dog, because then the bottom line is just money, so-called. Everybody run after the money because that's the only thing that is universal that we can all identify with. That's the only thing that distinguishes people within our society, one from the other. Who has more money, who has less money, because there's no other bottom line. There's no other universal language. There's no other thing that we have in common. There are more things that divide Nigeria than bring us together. Different language, different religion, different culture, different history. We have to really think. And we have to, like I said, this is not going to be, it's going to be controversial. We have to really think. We really have to analyze. For us to solve the problem that we're at, we have to retrace how the problem came from. Before the Europeans came, we had Oyo Empire, Benin Empire. A lot of these empires were successful. And they were united, they were nations. They were united. They had a structure. They had structure. They had their army. They had their economy. They had the social political system. All of these things existed and all of these things were functional before we try to superimpose the European ideas on top of us. Not that we cannot learn from them. I've been influenced by European ideas. You can be influenced by it, but then you have to adapt it to your own way. We have to be self-defining. We have to define who we are. We have to allow people to define who they are. We have to embrace our culture. We have to embrace our indigenous languages. These indigenous languages need to be promoted. This indigenous culture needs to promote it. Nothing that we have needs to be denigrated. I'm going to say a lot of controversial things today. Yes, what you even believe, even our native and natural religion or so-called philosophical systems do not need to be put down. Even if you don't believe in these things, you don't need to attack them and claim them to be demonic, or you claim them to be idols because the European have said so. 100%. This is part of our culture. Religion and culture are intertwined. If you go to the European culture, you go to the Christian culture, you go into this. But I digress. That's going to be my next video. History, culture, and religion. History, culture, and religion. That's going to be the next video. See, all of these ideas interlock with each other. They interlock and they intersect. And we have to understand. We have to be very careful what we do, what we accept, and what we reject. We cannot reject our culture. We cannot reject our culture. If a man who hates his culture hates himself. We cannot reject our language. And it's a damn shame that English is our national language. It's a damn shame I have to do these videos in English. But that's just what the case may be. And it's a gradual process. Hopefully we'll get there. Hopefully we'll begin to look beyond ourselves as individuals and begin to see that we have a common destiny. Now, like I said, look at the English structure. Yes, Great Britain is 3 nations, but they can come together as one. But yet, there's a form they can still maintain some type of autonomy, just like how it used to be with the Western, the Eastern, what the region that they had in the beginning. That makes sense. All of these options need to be explored. We cannot force a nation to be cohesive when it's not. We have to take step by steps to bring us to that point. Regardless, we are close together. Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Fulani, we still are close by proximity in land. But each of us have to embrace who we are first of all. You have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. You have to respect yourself before you can love anyone else. We have to go inward first of all. We have to start from there. Okay? I've touched a lot of different topics. I might have gone off track a little, like I explained in the beginning. I'm not perfect. And I try to do these things a bit spontaneously because I want it to be like a conversation. I don't want to be like a preacher. I want to try to engage the listener. And so once again, I beseech you to be patient with me through this series of videos. And it's going on 30 minutes now, a bit longer than what I want it to be. And next time I'm going to come back with history, religion, and culture. That's going to be the next video. And hopefully we're going to take it from there. I appreciate your time and your patience for listening to me. And once again, I beseech you, this is something we have to do together. It's not just about me. It's about a greater thing. It's about making us, make Nigeria great, make us great, make our nations great, make the Yoruba great. Restore cultural and national pride. This is imperative. And a sense of community, a sense of responsibility, a sense of accountability. Don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Once again, that's the thought I'm going to leave with you. Thanks for your time once again. See you next time.